Welcome back. We are talking about the end of mental illness, how neuroscience is transforming psychiatry and helping prevent or reverse mood and anxiety disorders, ADHD, addictions, PTSD, psychosis, personality disorders, and more.
For this episode, I would love for our listeners and people watching to think about one thing. Who in your life, whether it's you or someone else, has suffered because of the label mental illness? And how would you like to have seen that handled differently? Because I know just in my own family alone, there's numerous cases I could talk about. And I know each and every one of you know someone, whether it's yourself, someone in your family, a friend. We just are all touched by this. So I'm curious to know, how has it affected you, the stigma around mental illness, and how would you like to have seen it handled differently?
And post at brainwarriorswaypodcast.com. Also leave us a review, ask us a question. If we answer your questions, actually everybody who posts will be entered into a raffle for one of Tana's Brain Warriors Way cookbooks. So let's dive into the book a little bit. In the show, I actually talk about 6 practical steps, and I talk about the evil rulers. But step number 1 in the end of mental illness is to begin to eliminate the term mental illness and call these things what they really are. Brain health issues that steal your mind. I hate the term mental illness. I've hated it since I decided to be a psychiatrist because I knew it was wrong. That, I guess about 100 years ago, psychiatry and neurology got divorced. And neurology got the brain and psychiatry got the mind. But it was a bad divorce, and psychiatry shouldn't have given up the brain, because the brain is involved in everything you do. And when it works right, you work right. And when it's troubled for whatever reason, and there's a whole bunch of reasons, you have trouble in your life. So when they took away your thyroid, for example, your brain didn't work right. And the manifestation of that was depression. It wasn't because you had a weak will.
Right. And how often do you see that? I mean, how often do we see that where rather than this label mental illness, is it because of either a medication or an infection or something like that? It's so often. And just to touch on what you just said, just like mental illness, I can't stand the term disability, like disabled people. It really bothers me. I like special needs much better. Because we know so many people that are just rock stars and they've got special needs, but they're not disabled. Like, it just bugs me so much. This is the same concept.
The term mental illness insidiously stains everyone diagnosed, making them less likely to seek help. I can't tell you over my 40-year career as a psychiatrist how many people have said, I'm not going to go see no damn psychiatrist.
I said that.
I'm not crazy. You said you weren't going to date a psychiatrist.
Because I was hurt by one. Yeah.
When 1979, I decided to be a psychiatrist for all the right reasons. And my father, who was helping me pay for medical school, was mad at me. And
I love him.
He said,
he's so great.
Why don't you want to be a real doctor? Why do you want to be a nut doctor and hang out with nuts all day long? And that hurt my feelings. But now I sort of gag.
You sort of agree with him.
What he said is that nobody really wants to see a psychiatrist. No one wants to be labeled as defective or abnormal, but everybody wants a better brain. No one is shamed. I said this before, for cancer, diabetes, or heart disease. Likewise, no one should be shamed for any mental health condition. But if we don't lower the stigma for these brain health issues, many more people will suffer and die. Every 14 minutes in this country, someone commits suicide. It is the second leading cause of death among young people, which should just horrify us. And it's increased 33% since 1999, while cancer has declined 27%. Why? We're working on the wrong paradigm. Mental illness places the emphasis on your psyche or your mind, which is vague and hard to define, right? I mean, I've been a psychiatrist a long time. Your mind, what is that? Is it the noise in your head? Is it the chatter? Is it your automatic reaction?
Well, and it scares us to think that, so we don't want to
And I'm going to lose my mind. That scares people when our brain imaging work clearly shows us these are brain health issues that steal your mind. And in the book, I open chapter 1 with Jarrett, and you know Jarrett.
Oh my gosh, I just saw him.
And Jarrett was diagnosed with ADHD when he was 3 years old. He was hyperactive, restless, impulsive, had no friends. His third grade teacher told his mom and dad that they should never expect much from him because he'd never do well in school. He had a terrible temper. He saw 5 doctors who all diagnosed him with ADHD. He was placed on 5 stimulant medications, so like Ritalin, Concerta, Vyvanse, Adderall. After the second stimulant makes you worse, the doctors had a learning problem.
Right.
The stimulants actually triggered rages and mood swings. And
this is a little kid we're talking about.
His last doctor wanted to put him on an antipsychotic medication, Risperdal. And that's when his mother, who you'd known, had been close to, saw us on television and contacted you and wondered if she shouldn't bring him to the clinic.
So this is a little kid, and when he was really young, and this is such a terrible thing, and it's so horrible as like a mother to have to go through this, let alone to say it about another kid. But when he was little, I had a baby and he was like 3 years old. I was sort of afraid for her to be around him, not because I thought he was going to hurt her intentionally, because his energy was so intense and he was so big that I thought he would hurt her accidentally even, but he would just he couldn't settle down. He couldn't be still and he'd kick walls. And it's a little scary for moms to have their kids around kids like that because they're unpredictable. And you don't know what they're going to do. And so this is a kid. And I just saw him recently and it's just such a difference. So talk about it.
Well, the first thing we do if you come to Amen Clinics is we'll take a really detailed history and then we're going to look at your brain. Because how the heck do you know if you don't look? And, as you guys know who listen to us, we do a study at Amen Clinics called SPECT. SPECT looks at blood flow and activity. It looks at how your brain works, and it basically tells you 3 things: good activity, too little, or too much. And then our job is to balance it. If it's sleepy, we'll stimulate it. If it's overactive, we'll calm it down. Typically, we think of ADHD as associated with sleepy frontal lobes, but his weren't. In fact, he had a pattern we called the ring of fire.
So putting him on a stimulant.
Where his brain was working way too hard. Stimulating him was like pouring gasoline on a fire. So now the scans give us a map, and I often say without a map, we're lost. The scans give us a map, and it told me I needed to calm his brain down.
Rather than stimulate it.
Which I did with supplements. So I created a supplement called Neuralink that has GABA, 5-HTP, and L-tyrosine to help balance the brain, but mostly calm the brain.
And exercise helped him.
And parent training and brain healthy habits, just like we talk about. And within just a couple of months, his behavior's better. The rage has stopped. He was able to make friends. He's now been on the honor roll or dean's list for 8 years. He wants to be a firefighter. And you remember we went to the Paul Mitchell event together, and I sat next to him. I mean, he's this tall, good-looking, just
he's like
person.
6'2", and this is a kid who never got invited to birthday parties because same reason, parents were a little afraid of him. Kids were afraid of him, and now he became like a star athlete at school, honor roll student. He's 6'2". He's like in the paramedic program, and he's just so sweet. I mean, he's just so kind, so good with his siblings. Very polite. When I come in, can I get you something? Just a completely different person.
Well, and when I was sitting next to him at a charity event, and he told me he wanted to be a firefighter. And I said, why? What he said was, on someone's worst day, I want to make it better. Think about this. From where he was to where he is now, did Jarrett have a mental illness? Absolutely not. He had a brain that was working too hard, and when we balanced it, he became this wonderful
Purposeful,
human
sweet
being that he always wanted to be. That, our work together helped to change the trajectory of his life.
Yeah, he didn't enjoy getting in trouble.
And that's the end of mental illness. So in the book, in chapter 1, I actually go through, well, how would psychiatrists
So I think this is
have
interesting.
treated Jared
this is interesting.
throughout the ages? Well, in ancient times, they may have drilled a hole in his skull called trepanation to release the evil spirits out. 400 BC, Hippocrates would have changed his diet, got him to exercise, put him in a job that he loved to fit his restless nature. So all those things I like. And then likely he would have bled him.
That was the only thing that was negative. But everything else sounded really good.
He would have bled him to release the excessive fluids in his body. In the Middle Ages, they may have put him in an asylum and chained and beaten him, trying to control his behavior. In the 18th and 19th centuries, they may have sterilized him and placed his family under suspicion in the eugenics program, which actually started in the United States.
Wow.
And is the precursor to Nazi atrocities.
Wow.
In the 20th century, Freud may have had him on the couch 4 or 5 times a week talking about his internal conflicts and his
mother.
relationship with his mother. Why
His mother's wonderful.
Why are mothers always
I
blamed?
don't know.
for
She's
everything?
great. I know her.
But insanity really is hereditary. You get it from your children.
Yes, I agree with this.
They can make you
Yes.
crazy.
I have a 16-year-old. She's just starting to do that.
In the 1950s, he may have had a prefrontal lobotomy to decrease his aggression, but permanently damage his personality. In the 60s, like in the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, he might have had ECT, electric
I saw
shock
that when I was in
therapy.
nursing school. I saw a lot of it.
Not the sort of buzz he would like. And currently, he was in the 15-minute med check. Well, let's try this medicine. Let's try that medicine.
Let's guess.
Without any change in his diet, without anything else.
And if it hurts him, it's not the
It's
doctor's
because
fault.
he has a personality disorder, not because the meds are problematic. Even though all psychiatric meds have black box warnings, because the FDA knows that they hurt a percentage of the population. Now, let me be clear. I am not opposed to medication.
No.
I am opposed to the indiscriminate use of medication without doing all of the brain health strategies as well. So that's chapter 1. And I really take on my profession because I believe we're going the wrong way. And I'm not the only one. Tom Insel, who is director of the National Institute for Mental Health, said, we've basically not changed our outcomes in 7 decades. Our outcomes are no better than they were in the 1950s because, and we use a diagnostic Bible called the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. So right away, the name of the book tells us the problem, because the DSM is, if you have 5 of these 8 symptoms, you have major depression. But it doesn't tell you one thing
About why.
about what causes it or what to do with it. And their whole books on state-of-the-art treatment for major depression, which you don't know the cause of.
Yeah, what if it's your thyroid and someone gives you ECT?
Or you have head trauma.
Right.
Or you have a toxin, or you have an infection. Now, there's a disclaimer where if you have a medical problem, then you don't get this diagnosis. But how the hell do you know
How do you
if
know?
no one ever looks at your brain? And that's what I argue is insane. And I'm a psychiatrist. I know how to diagnose insanity. And diagnosing major psychiatric disorders without any biological information is nuts. It's just nuts. That we need to understand the biology, and that's where our brain imaging work comes in. We need to understand the biology to go with the symptoms.
So you are saying that nuts is a diagnosis, just not for the patients.
It's for my profession. Stay with us.
If you're enjoying the Brain Warriors Way podcast, please don't forget to subscribe so you'll always know when there's a new episode. And while you're at it, feel free to give us a review or 5-star rating, as that helps others find the podcast.
If you're considering coming to Amen clinics or trying some of the brain healthy supplements from BrainMD, you can use the code podcast10 to get a 10% discount on a full evaluation at amenclinics.com or a 10% discount on all supplements at brainmdhealth.com. For more information, give us a call at 855-978-1363.